Hi everyone, in today's video I'll be talking about the latest character that was just added in the game, Rhadamantys. As usual, I'll be going through his skill, his clothes, his constellation, and I'll also talk about how to potentially play him in a formation lineup, etc. In the very end of the video, I will also be showing you how to clear his Golden Trap. Alright, now without further ado, let's just go straight into it. I'm gonna start off with his passive because that's kind of like his signature skill. Basically, what his passive is gonna do is that every single time for when you do a normal attack, you're gonna increase his critical damage. And if your normal attack happen to crit as well, that's gonna be boosted even further. So literally just remember that in your head. Normal attack increase critical damage. So as the battle goes on, his critical damage is gonna get higher and higher, and he will do more damage, etc. Then we go on to his ultimate, and that's actually going to be linked to his passive. Because what happens is normally his ultimate deals damage to 3 enemies, and it's only 70% of attack for 1.5 seconds. However, if your passive is actually allowing you to already build out your critical damage to to a certain threshold, which I believe is 80%. Yep. So once your passive increase your critical damage to 80%, then this change from just targeting 3 enemies to AoE and dealing 300 and up to 350% of attack. So that's actually great. And because this also knocks back over the target for 2 seconds, this is also going to be a really good interruption skill. So that's basically what you really want to do. You essentially his whole game mechanics. You try to reach his passive as quickly as possible so that he bring out massive amount of AoE damage with his ultimate. That's basically how this character works, I guess. Now let's move on to his looping skill. His looping skill is quite straightforward, but it's actually really nice because what happens is quickly attacks an enemy 7 times. Now, every single time you attack, it's going to count as a normal attack. And I already mentioned, every single normal attack is going to increase your critical damage by 3% in the highest level. Uh, and just think about that. You are instantly going to increase your passive critical damage really quickly. And once again, I already talked about once your passive reaches a certain threshold, your ultimate going is going to get really strong. So basically, once again, this looping skill just really help you to reach that threshold as quickly as possible. And the last skill for him is Furious Spirit. This is a trigger skill, and I guess this is kind of his defensive mechanic, which is basically whenever he take damage, which is going to be more than 15%, then what's going to happen is he's going to increase attacking speed, but also immune that damage. And because this is a trigger skill and can be activated every 6 seconds, this basically means that he can't take more than 15% in one go every 6 seconds. So that greatly improves his survivability. And because you need him to survive in order for his passive to build up to that threshold, this is really good. And on top of that, because this increased attacking speed, once your attacking speed is increased, you're gonna do your normal attack faster. So once again, helping you to reach that threshold quicker. So it's actually really nice. All 4 of his skills really nicely linked up to essentially his win condition of trying to reach that try to build up his passive critical damage as soon as possible to reach that threshold to then increase his ultimate damage, etc. So this very nice synergy amongst all of his skills. All right, now let's move on to his clothes. His clothes, the first one is quite nice, increasing attacking speed. Once again, that helps you to reach your threshold quicker. Then the next one is when you are releasing Max Vigilante, which is I think that's the greatest caution. I think just a mistake in the translation, but basically when you release that ultimate, then you are going to remove the cooldown of the wind slash. So once again, let's say in your first ultimate, you are not able to do too much damage because your passive hasn't built up. But as soon as you do that, you are then able to reset this, and that really nicely set you up for your second ultimate, which by then you should be have reached your passive threshold. So that's actually really good. Um, the third one is when the critical damage of the Wind Dragon. So once again, this is the passive skill. So when that extra crit damage reach 40%, then you already is gonna strengthen your greatest caution, so his ultimate to once again, there's something wrong with the translation, but I think what it's trying to say is that it ignores 80% of the target's defense. So that's very good. Basically, not only you're doing a lot of damage, you're also going to ignore defense. So that's going to work really nicely in story maps. And then last skill, which is your crit rate, is going to increase by 2% and damage bonus will by 1% for each normal attack. And that's really nice because look what it's trying to say. It's actually increasing crit rate. All of his other skills is just saying that, you know, I'm trying to increase damage, I'm trying to increase damage. But if your rate is too low, what are you gonna do with that increased damage, right? However, what the last level of his close is actually able to do is that I'm actually going to increase my crit rate as well. And you know, if I get a crit in my normal attack, that builds my passive even faster, and also just greatly going to increase my overall damage because I'm going to crit more often, and I'm going to actually take advantage of the extra crit damage from my passives. So that's why it's also really nice. I highly recommend you get level 30 for his close if you want to build him up. And then let's move on to his constellation, which I think is, you know, absolutely amazing. Basically, this is to do with his defensive mechanic. Um, at 3 star, basically what's going to do is just going to increase attacking speed even further. So that's nice. We already do that. What's going to help you get your passive quicker. But at 9 out of 9, what's going to be really ridiculous is that when a single damage deal exceeds 10% of max HP, then you're going to ignore that. Before it was 15%. And at trigger interval of 6 seconds. However, at the highest level, this is the trigger interval is going to be 3 seconds as well, and that's just absolutely crazy. Not only you're ignoring that, you're able to do that every single 3 seconds. So that already makes it immensely amazing. So that's basically, you know, how good his constellation is, and you definitely want his constellation to be maxed. All right, I am actually going to talk about something else, which is not in the game right now, but I think it's going to be super, super important for him. Is that in the future, there's actually going to be an exclusive Arashiki for Rhadamantys that's going to make him absolutely broken. And it's very similar to his Constellation, but basically, what that Arashiki is going to do is that when you take, so right now the trigger interval is 3 seconds, right? What's gonna happen is that Arashiki is essentially gonna say when his trigger skill activate, he's also going to be immune to damage for the next 2.7 seconds. I'm just going to let that sink in for a bit. This is a trigger skill that can activate every 3 seconds, and once it activates, he's going to be immune to all damage for 2.7 seconds. What that effectively means is that if the enemy is going to do a lot of high damage, obviously you actually need to trigger that. So, you know, they actually need to do a single damage exceeding 10% of max HP. However, if they do manage to do that consistently, you are still going to be immune for 2.7 seconds out of that 3 second interval. So actually the enemy is only able to hit you for zero point 0.3 seconds. And that's going to essentially make Rhadamantys unkillable, like literally unkillable. Um, if Rhadamantys is unkillable, and I already talked about his passive is going to increase his crit rate and crit damage. So his passive is going to increase his crit damage. His close is going to increase his crit rate. If you are not able to kill him, he's going to do insane amount of damage, and that's basically how crazy it is. Now, this is especially good in story map because in story maps you are facing up against enemies who are much higher level than you, so your trigger skill is going to activate a lot of the time because every single, you know, attack is likely to be able to wipe out more than 10%. In PvP, it's less amazing because the enemies often are not actually that strong, is able to do 10% of HP in one go. So the trigger skill is going to activate a lot less, and therefore, you know, you are not actually taking the most advantage of it. But in story map, this is going to be absolutely insane. So, you know, right now, Rhadamantys is not available in the game. Oh, sorry, his exclusive Arashiki is not available in the game, so you may not be able to see its full potential. But trust me, once that is released, assuming it's going to be released in the same way the Chinese version did, he will be absolutely insane in story mode and really help you to clear stages, etc. So just bear that in mind. Now let's talk about some formation idea for Rhadamantys. As I don't actually have him, so I'm going to represent him by another dark character, so Pandora in this case, because she's also affiliated with Hades, Spectres, etc. All right. So now let's talk about first of all, where would you want to place Rhadamantys? Now, right now in the game when it's just released, maybe Rhadamantys is not so bulky that you can always put him up front. However, I'm gonna talk about formation idea in terms of kind of end game when the exclusive Arashiki is released. Because as soon as that is released, you only get a zero point 0.3 second window to do any damage to Radamantis, and that's going to be absolutely insane. And he, in those scenarios, he will pretty much be unkillable. So you definitely want to place him up front. So basically, that's how I'm going to position Radamantis in kind of my formation ideas. I'm going to place him up front to really take advantage of his exclusive Arashiki. But, bear that in mind, that's in the end game, once that's actually released in the game. All right, now Rhadamanthus is all about kind of doing lots of normal attacks to uh, really build up his passive critical damage as soon as possible. Now, so if you actually want characters who have good synergy with him, the best characters would be the ones who are able to increase his either attacking speed or increase crit rate or crit damage to really maximize his damage output. So let's bring those characters in first. So the ones I'm gonna suggest would be, for example, Hound Asterion. Hound Asterion is able to boost those rates once he those stats once his looping skill, his mind enhancing kick in. So that's very good. Another character would be Libradoko. Libradoko is able to bring that in once his what do you call it? His level 20 of his armor, his clothes is unlocked. He's then able to increase attacking speed, crit rate, and also crit damage. So that's goes really well with Rhadamanthys. Some other characters who are also able to help out would be Babel. Babel surprisingly is actually really good because what Babel is able to do is place enemies under burn. And if you actually read the description in Babel skills, characters under burn are easier to for you to land critical attacks against. So that's actually really nice from that sense. Another character that you are able to do would be Evil Seiya, because once Evil Seiya bring up his dimension effect, then enemies underneath that effect are gonna get 25% more likelihood to be for you to land a critical hit against them. So all of these characters are really good at gonna increase Radamantis' attacking speed and therefore more critical hit and therefore more critical damage, etc. Or just full on increase their critical damage and critical rate straight away to maximize his damage output. So they are very, very good together. Now, from formation point of view, it may looks a bit weird because you are not actually taking the full advantage of the formation bonus. So if you do actually want to tweak this slightly, what I would recommend is swapping out Evil Sega with a water character. And in this case, I'm going to suggest Mermaid Tetes because once again, if you have Mermaid Tetes with level 30 of her clothes, she is going to increase whoever she's linking up to their attack, defense, but also critical rate and dodge. And that's actually going to be really good. So you get even higher crit from being linked up with Mermaid Tetris. The only caveat here is that you may need to play around with some power levels because maybe your Libradoko may have higher power level than Rhadamanthys. This is something you need to test, but essentially you can swap out equipment or play around with maybe constellations or close levels to make sure your Mimetatus is definitely going to link up with the Relemences, and in which case Relemences is going to be really strong. So this is going to be another formation that I would highly recommend. And the last formation I'm gonna suggest is that if you don't want to do a rainbow formation, what you can also do is go down actually more of a burn formation because your Babel is very famous for being kind of a burn flame team damage kind of team. And so if that's the case, what you can do is you can bring back Evil Sega first of all, because it's still good synergy. But rather than Libradoko or Hound Asterion, I do recommend swapping out Libradoko because you do sometimes want a healer in your team, but you would then want to swap out your Liberdoko with Leo Iki. So in this case, Leo Iki can be placed up front because he will just keep resurrect himself, and this is still really good synergy because essentially now you almost have like two ways of dealing damage. You have your Rhadamantys doing lots of crit, but you also have your Leo Iki and Babel combination to do lots of like flame damage as well. So this is also going to be a really good formation. So is Rhadamantys a character that you should try to get? Um, I personally think Rhadamantys is actually really strong, but his strength only comes once his full power only comes once his exclusive Arashiki is released in the game. And right now, if you do try to build him, you are gonna essentially be playing a much weaker version of him. So from that point of view, I think you can certainly build Rhadamantys, but I wouldn't suggest pulling him in this event because even if you build him up, he's not going to be at his full power, and you're kind of wasting a bit of resources. It's probably a much better way of resourcing if you actually just ignore him, save up of the petals, and just kind of naturally slowly build him up, so that by the time you actually have his exclusive Arashiki, then he would actually be playable at full strength. So that's basically what I recommend. And especially if you look at the potential upcoming light and dark characters, you have um, God Close Seiya, who I don't actually know when he will be released. I'm kind of just waiting for him to be released. But he is going to be such a strong character that you really don't want to miss out on him. So my personal suggestion is that as good as Rhadamantys is, he is more for much later on in the future when his exclusive Arashiki is here. So for the time being, I would recommend for you to just ignore him altogether. If you happen to get copies of him, then that's fine. Just let him slowly build up, but don't really try to aggressive try to pull him because you really want to use those resources for another character who you're actually able to use straight away, such as God Closea when he does finally arrive.